Hey, everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
You're listening to the Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network, brought to you by onX Maps. Now, onX is a digital mapping app that you download directly to your phone, mobile device, and you can even use it on your desktop. But what is great about it, the functionality here, is that you can drop waypoints and you can mark tree stand locations. You can mark trail camera locations, scrapes, rubs, bedding areas. You can document all that. So it's like a living journal of your properties that you hunt. Now, what's great about this, it can be used on a small scale, let's say like a 40-acre farm, or like we did on our mule deer hunt out west, this 33,000-acre big chunk of public ground. It can allow you to document everything that you've seen on there as well, glassing points, where the mule deer were coming in and out, and so much more. If you want to find out more about the functionality of onX, visit onxmaps.com. And for first-time users, you can use the discount code NATION20 for 20% off.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and I'm the host of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'll also be your host into the world of hunting the icon of North American wilderness, the bear. We'll talk about tactics, gear, conservation, but we'll also bring you into some of the wildest country on the planet, chasing bear.
This is the part of the podcast where I usually say, I want to draw your attention to, and I point you to some reputable business. I'm not going to say that this time, but I am going to say, check out our new hats at bear-hunting.com. We're coming out with a new flashy hat series, and we've got a hat that says Bear Grease, a hat that says Flashy Mule, and a hat that says Bear Dogs. So really colorful hats. They're patch hats. They're really cool. Check it out at bear-hunting.com at our store. Secondly, you'll hear me talk a little bit about BHA on this podcast. Check out Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Organization. These guys are doing good stuff. I don't care what anybody says. We on this podcast, I talk about how that 2,100 responses to the Florida bear hunting situation came in from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Guys using their forum to send an email to the officials that was a form letter that said, we support bear hunting. And so check out Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. Lastly, this is another podcast where we're talking about whitetail hunting up in Manitoba, Canada with Tom Ainsworth at Grandview Outfitting. I'm with my really good old-time friend Chris Roberts. So we kind of reminisce a little bit and tell a couple of stories, one fun story in particular from our past. But we talk a ton about hunting with Tom. Check out Tom Ainsworth. Man, I'm shooting myself in the foot because if I go back, I'm sure there's going to be more people hunting up there. But Tom is the real deal when it comes to Canadian whitetail hunting. It's a lot more affordable than you think. So check out Grandview outfitting, call Tom Ainsworth. It's probably a lot more doable than you think for a big Canadian whitetail. Okay, all right, Colby. We're starting the podcast now.
Can Colby hear us?
Colby, old Colby produces the podcast.
So can he hear us right now?
I mean, he can't. He can't hear us right now.
Oh.
But when he listens to this, he'll hear it.
Okay.
Colby's omnipresent.
Well, I was just like, this is amazing. If Colby can hear us.
Colby, can you hear us? Colby, can you hear us?
I was like, we can't get the headphones to work, but Colby can hear us.
Oh, man. We are on our way back from Canada, and we've been deer hunting up in Canada, and I've got my longtime friend, Chris Roberts, with me. Chris, we've known each other since grade school.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that the other day. I think it's at least second grade.
Well, I mean, you started school at the school I went to in kindergarten, right?
Yeah, so you were a year older than me.
I was a year older than you, so I mean, we would have known each other. But my first memories of us being friends were maybe not real good friends, but pretty good playground friends. Were in grade school.
Yeah, I went over to your house in grade school.
Yeah. Well, okay, first things first, Chris. We're going to, on this podcast, we're going to talk about your deer hunt in Manitoba, Canada. We're going to talk about that.
All right.
But we're also going to talk about some other stuff. And there's a few just like housekeeping things that we got to get going, okay?
Fire.
First thing is, I just got a text from one of the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers members down in Florida, Jim Hasley. And so right now they're revamping and taking public input for the bear management program for Florida. So in, I want to say 2016, it could have been 15, there was a bear hunt institute in Florida, which was the first one in a long time because the bears are growing, numbers are strong.
Getting
and
bigger.
they did a 300 bear quota, and they met the quota in a very short period of time. But because Florida has such an urban population and just it kind of is the way it is, they protested it big time.
Right.
And because of political influence, basically the Game and Fish kind of backed off of the bear hunt and said they were going to close it down for a certain period of time till they could do some study on it to see what how they were going to go forward managing it, which basically it was a political move by them to not get pounded by the anti-hunters. So right now they're taking a public period of comment for just people to write in to the government. Well, Jim told me that there have been 3,200 responses. This is what the Fish and Wildlife told BHA guys. And 2,100 of those responses have been from BHA members, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers members.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so right now on there's a link on the Bear Hunting Magazine Facebook page, but there'd be links in other places. But basically, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, they're good at organizing people. So you can go in through their portal and basically send an email to the wildlife officials with a statement about how we believe that these bears should be managed by regulated hunting, scientific-based wildlife management, through hunting is a positive thing. And so anyway, we're doing good down there, but we need to pound them some more.
Let me ask you a question. Does it matter if you live in Florida or not?
Apparently not, because I submitted a public comment,
Huh.
and it went through.
Well, and that makes sense because Florida is really big on, especially with their fishing, because they did actually public comments with like shark fishing.
Okay.
And shore fishing with that, and because I had a buddy who was going to go to that, and so that actually makes a lot of sense. So they do a lot of, people coming from out of states fishing. So
yeah,
I don't know how much they promote that with hunting, but I could see they're kind of set up for that.
Yeah. So we're doing good. But we need to keep pounding them. So we'll put a link on this web page on our podcast notes where people can go and easily. So you don't have to put in your information. Maybe you do have to put in your email, but you It's easy to do. That's point number one. Okay, now on to business at hand, Chris. Okay, we've been road tripping for, by the end of this thing, it's going to be like 36 hours together, okay? And so the other day on the radio, on your playlist, came up this song called D.B. Cooper.
D.B. Cooper.
Tell me what you know about D.B. Cooper. Tell me the story of D.B. Cooper.
I'll do my best. And so and first off too, I mean, we were just talking about this, I've been, trying to stay up with Clay as long as I can. And, he mentioned he had a podcast and he sends me all of his videos and stuff. And I was like, and I love podcasts. So I was like, you have a podcast? And I had no idea.
So right before this podcast, Chris realized that I had a podcast.
Yeah, and so
thanks, man. Thanks, bro.
No, I mean, he sends me his videos and all this, and if I'd have known he had a podcast, I would have.
So you only listen to the stuff that I send you?
Well, I didn't know. How would I have known you had a podcast? I don't Google Clay Newcomb.
Oh, you don't?
I'm not. No, I mean that would be weird.
Well, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Well, thank you. And now you're going to get a few more subscribers. But anyway, and I'm glad you like this story. My girlfriend wasn't as interested. I love her to death. But anyway, so I found out about this story, and I was telling you, is Unsolved Mysteries. That was a show I used to watch. As a kid.
We're taking it way back.
Yeah, I mean,
to the late '80s, early '90s.
Yeah, I mean, the host of that, I believe his name was like Robert Stack, and I apologize for anyone if I'm not getting the correct version of this, but I'll do as best as I can. So this
facts don't really matter on this podcast.
Okay, good. So this gentleman, as best as I can remember, he hijacks a plane. And I want to say he hijacked it in Seattle.
Somewhere in the Northwest.
Correct. And
you told me this story the other day like you were the authority on D.B. Cooper.
Well,
and that's what I expect.
So he writes this ransom. So he goes to this stewardess and he hands her letter. And he asks for $200,000. He says, I have a bomb. And he asked for $200,000, which this was in the 70s. So that was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And he signed it D.B. Cooper. And he also said he wanted, I don't remember how many parachutes, but at least 2 parachutes.
2 parachutes.
Yeah. And so anyway, the FBI actually gives him the money. They marked the bills.
So he hijacked the plane somehow on the ground? And they gave him the money and they gave him the parachutes.
Right. I don't know if they landed in Seattle from like Portland or anywhere.
Okay, so maybe he hijacked them in the air.
Right.
Landed the plane.
Right. Or it might have been as they're taking off.
Okay.
But anyway, and so they give him the money and the parachutes, and he keeps the stewardess on there and the pilots. And they know that he knew enough about it to fly the plane, or knew enough about planes to know that this type of plane, that you could fly it with the ladder down.
Okay.
And he asked the pilot to take off with the I guess ladder, the steps down, and they wouldn't do it. And so they take off and they get up at a certain altitude, and all of a sudden the pilot realizes that he's lowered the steps. And
is this plane full of people?
No, he's let the people off.
This was okay.
This was a commercial flight,
but it had people on it to begin with,
right? And they gave him the money.
I guess DB had a soft heart or something.
Well, no, they gave him the money.
So that was the deal.
Yeah,
you give me the money, I'll let the people go.
Yeah,
but he kept the pilot.
Well, he was telling them he was flying down to somewhere towards Mexico, or something,
right?
And so he jumps out.
Sounds like a foolproof plan.
Yeah, he jumps out, parachutes out. Well, the weather was not very cooperative for parachuting. Like from what I remember, it's like very few people at this altitude and this weather would live through it. And so he jumps, and so the FBI searched for him for days and days, and never found him. they found, so one of those parachutes, and this was not done intentionally, was actually a dummy parachute.
Now, how could the FBI unintentionally give him a dummy parachute?
It actually, the FBI didn't give it to him. It was the local,
It was like the local airport or something?
Yeah, it was the local, like, training facility.
And so they had a dummy
Yeah, they
parachute.
got it. Well, and he grabbed it. He just grabbed it and didn't know.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
And so it was given on accident. And so they found that.
They found the dummy parachute.
Right.
Like on the ground.
Right. Didn't find the original parachute. And then like a year later or 2 years later on the one of the major river is over by Portland, they found, now none of those marked bills were ever spent.
Really?
Yeah, but they found some buried by one of those rivers over. A kid was playing with his family, and now it could have been just buried, like they flew out, because that's kind of over by that pathway.
And somehow they got
right. But so the FBI claims he died, but
they never found D.B. Cooper.
Never
found D.B. Cooper.
No.
Wow.
So I think he made it.
Yeah, DB, if you're out there now.
I think he would be pretty old right now. I think he'd be in his 80s or
so. Why this story is relevant is unclear at this time, but we
it's a good song.
But we were listening to that song, road tripping to Manitoba, going up here to hunt. But I was pretty fascinated by that story. I'd never heard of it. So yeah, search for the song DB Cooper. Yeah.
The live version's a lot better.
Live version of DB Cooper. So Chris was always my buddy back in high school that was always ready to go. I mean, back in high school, you really weren't that serious of a hunter. I mean, you grew up hunting. Your dad, you hunted with your dad.
Right.
You were a big fisherman.
Mm-hmm.
You were probably maybe not a better fisherman than me. But you were always ready to go. So we coon hunted a lot.
Right.
We probably fished more than we did anything.
Yeah.
But we did coon hunt quite a bit. But there's one story that is kind of iconic that happened between us that we got to tell, and that's the story of the canoe.
Yeah, I mean it
kind of shaped our lives.
It did, and we did a lot of stuff together. I always had a pretty tight curfew, but my mom, if I was going out with Clay, and I don't know why, but she would say you didn't have a curfew.
She trusted me, Chris.
She did. Well, no, I know why, but she did, and so I mean we did a lot of stuff together. I mean, we spent time, going up on the mountain. That's our local mountain, and I mean and so we grew up in a small town, and there wasn't much to do except get in trouble or be outside. And Clay always liked being outside, and so any time I had to. But what he's talking about, do you want me to start that story?
Yeah. So this is the way I remember it. I was 19. You were 18. It was my first year in college, but I was coming home for whatever reason. And I think it was a Saturday. And it was in the spring. That's what I remember. Or early summer. And there was just a massive, just a downpour. Like a flash flood type situation. And, it probably rained 3 inches in a couple of hours or something. So these little creeks had just swollen up. And my dad had an old canoe, just an old beat-up canoe that leaked. It was a fiberglass canoe with like a aluminum frame on the inside. And it had been, he bought it from an old canoe outfitter somewhere on the Washita River down there. And it was just sitting at our house. And I think I'm not sure if the canoe got the name.
No, we had called it Old Glory.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
We had duct taped the leaks on this canoe, and we had fished out of it, and we had also spray painted a shark's face on the front of it.
I can remember when that happened. You're right. We spray painted that canoe.
And the other thing is,
we called it Old Glory.
Yeah, and this creek that we had gone by, half jokingly, we had always said when it flooded, we're going to canoe that.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever intended to.
Well, I remember I came home from college,
Yeah.
and I called you and I said, Chris, the creek is rolling. Because it was on my drive back to my parents' house, and you said, I'll be there in 30 minutes.
Let's do it.
And so you came to my house. We had one paddle. We
A
did
wooden
not
paddle.
have life jackets.
No.
And we used my dad's old, he had a big hiking stick that we had carved out of a hickory.
Yep.
And he was mad at me for
Losing that. It's a good stick.
It was a good stick. It was stupid for me to use it. But so we took that stick, a paddle, and we put in, and I told my mom, I said, Mom, I don't know where we're going to end up, but we're going to call you when we get there, and you're going to come pick us up. And she agreed to this. I mean, this was before cell phones.
And
We were just planning to take that canoe as far as we could or wanted to, and we were just going to walk up to somebody's house and say, can we use your phone to call someone to come pick us up?
And
was that not the plan?
Yeah.
That's the way I remember it.
And I don't know how it is, and I don't know where your listeners are, but in Arkansas where we are, and a lot of places in the South, when it rains and we get 1 to 2 inches in an hour, I mean, it floods.
Yeah.
And we get
like
those
flash flood.
Yeah, we get those low water bridges, and so I mean these small creeks, and so it was and so we were going, but I mean we thought we were going to be fine, and we had a leaky canoe named Old Glory that.
Well, so we put into the creek, and we're going down the creek, and in the first 100 yards we flip her over,
and we were able to stand in that.
It was, but yeah, the creek was pretty small at that point. This creek ran into a bigger creek.
That was fun.
We flipped the canoe in a bunch of brush that we got tangled in, and I just remember we just flipped it back over, dumped some of the water out, and we just kept going. The canoe is filling up with water, like it's probably 25% full of water when Briar Creek meets Prairie Creek. And Prairie Creek was a big creek.
And it got really wide, and it was kind of smooth. And we pulled over to the side and dumped out. And we thought, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just remember when when the creek merged into the bigger creek, I mean, it was like...
Oh, it was... yeah.
There were big waves. And the creek was probably 40, 50 yards wide.
Yeah.
And just
ran out
muddy
into the
like
yards.
Chocolate milk.
Yeah.
Ran out into the woods.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a straight up flood. And here we are. And when we hit the big creek, I remember just thinking we were in the chips. Well, we ride for probably a quarter mile down the big creek, and it crosses a low water bridge. And we cross this low water bridge, and there's cars on either side of the low water bridge.
There was a 2-ton dually backing up.
There was a big truck that was not wanting to cross. I mean, there's no way they would have crossed. They would have for sure washed down the stream if they would have crossed. But there was people waving us down like, don't do it. And here we come.
I thought they were waving at us like, hi, and so I waved to them as we went across. And I remember you could hear so the water was so high above the bridge, and the water was sucking down into the culverts. Like it wasn't a continuous flow, so it was coming, and you would just hear woof, woof. Yeah. And I mean, it was just this force.
Yeah.
But at that time, we still didn't know what we were getting into.
We were. This truly was one of the most foolish things that I ever did, and it just shows the lack of awareness. And
we would have drowned if we would have swamped before the bridge.
Put the fear of God inside of me, and honestly, a deep respect for fast-moving water.
I still have a respect for fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my kids have a respect for fast-moving water because of this story. So we come across this low-water bridge, and I mean the water's roaring over this bridge. And when it crosses a bridge, the creek spreads out and like gets into the woods. Like so there's like big trees coming up out of the water. And we kind of miss the middle of the channel, and we get the canoe into the woods part. And I remember we T-boned a tree, and it flipped the canoe.
And that's where I actually got that scrape on my side, was hitting that tree.
Yeah.
Because I got you by it. You didn't even have a paddle.
Nope.
You had a stick.
Yeah.
And so you were just pushing and whatever. And so I back paddled and got you by it. And then it just hit my shoulder. And I got
it just dumped the canoe.
Yeah. Right over.
I was able to hold. So the canoe then is flipped over totally, but floating. I'm holding on to the canoe. The water's so deep we can't touch the bottom. I remember coming up out of the water and thinking, where's Chris? And so I start looking around and I cannot see you. And I'm looking over my left shoulder, holding on to the canoe with my right hand. And all of a sudden I see Chris's wet head pop up out of the water. That's what I remember. And we were still I was still not afraid.
I immediately knew what was going on. I immediately was scared. I almost want to say you were laughing.
I think, I'm serious. At that point, I still just thought this is not that big a deal.
There was a cedar tree in underwater that I remember it hitting on my shins.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I had on high top shoes, and I remember thinking, if my shoes get caught in this, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Because I remember, because it was, and I remember seeing it the next day too, and so that cedar tree was hitting my shins, and I remember thinking, and I didn't know, maybe I knew it was a cedar tree. I don't know. I just remember there was a tree hitting my, I could feel it just scratching my shins, and I was so scared my shoes were going to get caught up in it.
Mm.
And I remember, I honestly think I remember you kind of not giggling, but laughing. And I remember thinking to myself, and I think that was because you were still holding on to the canoe. I had no canoe. And I remember just thinking I was a baby. The amount of, it was okay, water, do with me what you will.
Yeah, we were out of control.
Yeah.
We didn't know it. Well, what happened was, as I look up and about 50 yards downstream, there is a giant dead oak tree that had fallen down. I remember it being a really big log.
It was huge.
Yeah, like a huge tree had fallen down into the water. And I thought, well, when the canoe comes up against that tree, it's just going to kind of pin up against the tree. I'll be able to climb up on the tree. So this tree, there's water going around it, there's water going under it, there's water going over it, but it's still on top of the water. And so, it's impeding the flow, but the river is on either side of this tree by a long shot. But so I'm just holding on the canoe, and I think, well, when the canoe hits the tree, it'll stick. Well, when the canoe hit the tree, and now by this time, Chris, you had already you beat me to the log.
No, I was still behind you.
Were you?
Yeah, I was still behind you because I saw I saw what happened. Yeah, I was still behind you.
Well, the canoe basically got sucked under in a flash.
It was this.
It
was
a
noise I'll
never forget. It was like a
forget.
piece of trash.
It was a noise I'll never
flushed down
forget.
a toilet.
Yeah.
It just whoosh. That 14-foot canoe, aluminum frame, fiberglass, just absolutely disappeared.
Was gone.
And I'm holding on to that canoe.
Yeah.
And so I disappear.
And I remember thinking, Clay's dead. And that sounds like I'm being funny, but I remember thinking, well, Clay's dead, and I'm about to hit that too.
So you were coming up against the log too, but you were out of the main little current that I was in.
And that, I was thinking about this on the way up here, is because I just hit where you went down, just hit it with my feet, and my arms hit the root base, and I grabbed onto that, and then you were. You can tell that how you want, but I still can't believe how fast you made it up on that. But I don't know why I didn't get more of a pull on me. I guess it was like you were saying, it's just I didn't hit that main current.
Yeah, I think you were just outside of it, just being outside of it 5 or 6 feet. But
yeah.
I remember being sucked under the water and just water pressing down. It just felt like somebody was just pushing my head under the water. And for the first time ever in my life, and the only time since then, I thought, this is what it feels like to die. I really thought that. I thought, this is what it feels like to drown. And it wasn't because I was sucking in the water or something, or it wasn't even because it was that long. It was just because the force of the water, the canoe, I just thought, this is how it ends. I had enough time to think about, and this sounds corny, but it is just true, is I had enough time to think somebody's going to call my mother and tell her that I'm dead. I thought that. Because when we left, we told my mom, we're going to call you.
Wow.
And I had the time to think, someone will call my mother and tell her that I'm dead. Well, all I remember, and it was honestly, it was just the grace of God. I remember reaching my arm up out of the water, and there was a limb or a root or something that I grabbed onto and was able to pull myself up out of it and crawl up on the log.
I just know you made it out of the water very fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like,
and you were still pinned up against the log down on the other side.
yeah, and I remember later you questioned this, and then you made me question it. But there was, I swear, in that root bed there was a water box.
Well, that's what you said, because
Yeah.
when I popped up on the log, you said, "There's a snake."
Well, no, you were
There's a
like, "Get
snake."
up here," and I'm like, "Clay, there's a water boxing right here."
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
then you're honestly pulled off a limb and is hitting the root bed, and it just slithered on into the root bed, and so I had to climb over where it was,
Yeah.
and it didn't do anything. But I remember, I mean, you're like, okay, and just went to work breaking off branches and beating on the root bed to scare it off.
Yeah. I remember that. So we got up there, Chris, on the root ball, and do you remember what we did?
I remember I think what you're talking about, it was before we got up on the root ball. It was after we climbed up a little bit, we prayed.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
So now we're safe on this log.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out how we're going to get out of this river.
Yeah.
And we were scared to death. I was.
I was scared and, a little bit of scared and relieved. Because, I mean, if we had to, I think we could have sat there till it went.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, well, I don't know.
I remember we prayed.
I
We
know, I do.
prayed
I-
on
no,
that
I
log,
remember
and
this
we
too, yeah.
just thanked God that we were alive.
Because I honestly have, since then, knock on wood, I've not felt that helpless.
Yeah.
I mean, the power of water, that much force.
Yeah. Well, it was.
Well, and you questioned me on this too. The limb we climbed out on,
Right.
that night we had really high winds, and we went back to look at the canoe, and that limb had fallen.
So
'Cause
what we
there was
did
a-
is there was a big limb about as big around as I don't know, it's probably 14 inches. A big limb of this oak was hanging out over a piece of dry
And
land.
it was dead.
It was dead, and we inched our way out on that and dropped about 12 feet to the bank and walked out.
And I'll give you props because you went first, because you had to go over the water
yes.
to get to land.
Yes.
And you went first, and it held you, and you dropped. And I went second, and we dropped. And then the next day we came back, and it had broke off. And that,
So-
I swear that.
what we did is we walked to the nearest house, which just happened to be somebody we knew. Do you remember?
Miss Graves.
Yeah, one of our old school teachers.
Yeah.
And we didn't call my mom, though. We called our other buddy to come pick us up. I don't remember why we did that, but we called our buddy. But so that was an iconic story that really just taught me to have respect for. It was just stupid.
At least
just,
wear a PFD.
Golly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just everything about it was stupid. Did you know that I had another significant water experience once in Alaska? I mean, this has just been in the last few years.
No.
You don't listen to Bear Hunting Magazine podcast, so you probably wouldn't know.
No, but I've had them come in the ER, man, and it's not pretty.
Once while I was in Alaska in a boat bear hunting, I had me and the guide got clotheslined by a log that was hanging out over the water while we were riding up the lake, up the river. And I was in the front of a 14-foot John boat with a jet motor. I was standing in the front of that boat with my back turned, looking back the way we'd come, so I wasn't looking in front of me. And, oh, man, those Alaskan rivers are littered with just logs and root balls, and they're treacherous. And that tree just clotheslined me, and all I know is I did 2 full flips in that boat, and I was back at the motor, 14-foot John boat, and
Wow.
my head was by the motor of the John boat, and the guide was in the back driving the John boat, and when I come to, he is in the water. He's wearing waders, and this is icy cold Alaskan river, and I see him bobbing up and down in the river, and I grab the stick and just dive it into the bank. Wow, just bam,
Right.
just crash it into the bank just to make it stop. And he comes floating by me, bobbing, and he's wearing waders. I mean, so he's in the water was fast, but it was not deep. I mean, it was probably chest deep, but moving fast. And he was able to just kind of just roll his way to the bank, and he popped up 40 yards downstream.
Wow.
And but all our technology, well, his communication technology got messed up, getting wet and stuff. But yeah, that was another thing that ruined that hunt for me. That was day 7 of a 10-day hunt, and it just took the steam out of me.
Yeah.
It really did. It scared me, and I was just it actually, again, it put the fear of God in me. I mean, just.
Have you seen those really small life vests that are instantaneous inflatable? Yeah, you should look into those when you're up there with those. I mean,
Yeah.
they're like waist belts.
Oh, okay, and you can just
Yeah, they
keep
wear them like fishing, and like we'd wear them when we were sailing and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean they're pretty expensive, but I mean they it's something like that. I would want one.
yeah. Well, hey, I didn't mention Chris Roberts. My buddy Chris Roberts is a medical doctor. Have you ever dealt with anybody in the ER from any kind of hunting related accident?
Some more fishing. You get a lot of fish hooks.
Fish hooks?
Yeah,
You pretty good at taking fish hooks out?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty easy. The worst one I saw was a fish hook right in the middle of an eye.
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
Did you have to take that out?
No, that one was flown to a children's center. It was
Really?
a-
So
it was a-
you
it was a
looked at it
child.
and you just said, take this guy
I
to
said-
surgery.
I said, oh no, yeah.
How old a person was it?
He's teens.
Really? Was it him or his brother, or
It
who
was
hooked
his
him?
brother.
No way.
Yeah, they
hooked
came
him
in
right
together,
in the eye,
right in the middle of his eye.
right through the
Yeah,
the good part of the
Yeah.
eye. Do you think he lost his sight?
probably.
Did he really?
Probably.
What? Well, you probably can't. Well, so a lot of fishing related, no hunting related accidents. then, huh?
I'm sure I have. I'm trying to think. I mean, a lot of times when literally, I work the job I do to take off a lot during hunting. But, I mean, you do get, I have had some gunshot wounds, but those are usually hunting related.
They're not hunting related.
No, and most of the, when would you think most of the knife wounds are?
When most of the what?
Most of the knife wounds are like when people cut themselves with knives.
I don't know.
Christmas morning.
Oh, is that right?
Almost every I've worked a lot of Christmases, and kids will come in opening presents
And cut themselves with a
yeah,
knife.
and so I get to have a little spill with them about
Little
yeah.
safety talk with Dr. Roberts.
Yeah, saying, hey kids, be careful with them. But that's pretty common to see kids on Christmas morning
Wow.
with a knife wound.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about your hunting, Chris. So, growing up, you were definitely exposed to hunting. I mean, your dad was a hunter, but you were not a big, serious hunter until later in, probably when you were in your late 20s, maybe?
Yeah, my dad really loved hunting, and he did a lot of actually bird hunting, before we lost the quail in Arkansas. And then, he was a forest ranger in Mississippi, and so he really loved turkey hunting and was, did a lot of deer hunting and stuff. And so when I was a kid, I really loved hunting and wanted to hunt. And so my dad had kind of give up hunting just, it was kind of, I don't know, it had gotten to be just, it was, it had gotten to be too busy for him. I don't know. It wasn't too busy. I don't know how to say it, but it was,
he just didn't pursue it real hard later in life.
Right, later in life. And so he still loved fishing. And so, I mean, we fished, in high school. We were either fishing or shooting basketballs. And so, so I really had, he would take me hunting and we would go hunting, but I had to be very persistent
But
on
it wasn't until after you got out of med school that you started hunting a lot. Is that right?
Until I started pushing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, he didn't bow hunt a lot. And so I had to, getting back with you was where I started bow hunting a lot. And then, there are a lot of people in med school that hunt a lot, but for me it would have been difficult. And so in medical school, without being tuned into it, it would have been hard for me to start that up.
Well, one of the things that was fun for me to see is that what year did you kill the buck we called Gladiator?
2012, I think.
Okay, so 2012, Chris contacts me, and you'd lived in a different town than me. I mean, I hadn't seen you in probably 5 or 6 years, to be honest. It'd been a while.
If we had, it'd just been hit and miss.
And you said, hey, I'm coming to Arkansas. I want to come see you.
No, I still lived in Arkansas.
Okay, well, you were coming to Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how it happened, but I said, we'll come up here and, well, no. I lent you my bow.
Yeah.
My
we
old
shot
DXT.
at your place.
We shot at my house. You liked it. You said, I'm wanting to get into bow hunting. And I said, well, hey, just take this bow and just, shoot it for a season. And if you like it, you can buy a bow. And so it was that Matthews DXT.
Right.
Well, season came around, and I said, well, why don't you come for the weekend and we'll hunt.
Right.
And you'd never killed a deer with a bow.
No.
At that time. And I took you to a farm over there that I hunt a lot, and I said, Chris, shoot the first deer that you see.
Do we have to tell this?
There's no shame in this. We'll tell the short version.
All right.
I said, shoot the first deer that you see.
Yeah.
And what I'm learning is that if I tell something to Chris, he does it.
I do.
And the first deer he saw, he shot.
I did.
And it was a small deer.
Very small.
But we didn't care.
Size of a medium.
It was a young doe.
Medium dog.
It was great eating.
Yeah.
So there's no shame in that. I had to kind of talk him through that after I ribbed him a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was your first bow kill, though.
Yeah, you literally looked up. Well, I had two kills in one day.
Man, that was a heck of a day.
Yeah.
So after he killed that doe, well, we went hunting that afternoon over by my house, and I was taking a buck pretty serious in a certain place, and I had another spot, and I put Chris there, and I said, hey, there was also a big buck in there, and I didn't want you shooting a doe and us going in there and kind of messing it up.
Right.
So I said, you killed a deer this morning. You got some meat. I said, I'm going to put you in this spot. And didn't I say the only deer I want you to shoot is this big buck? And
well, there was
a cull deer.
Yeah, there was a cull.
We called it a cull. It wasn't a cull. I mean, it was a deer like that, but it was a
deer that wasn't the most attractive deer, and then there was two smaller bucks that you said I couldn't, that you wanted to wait till next year, and then there was Gladiator.
So in this Gladiator buck was a big 10-point with kickers.
Yeah,
nice deer.
he was 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he was a 10-point with a kicker.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So mainframe 10 with one kicker. And to be honest, I didn't think that deer was going to show up. I didn't think you had a chance in the world of seeing that deer.
I know. I figured that afterwards.
And I wasn't trying to put you in a gar hole. I was just being honest with you. I mean, I was like, I'm going to go hunt this. I couldn't take people on this other property I was going to. So I put you on a property that I could take people to. And, man, I'll be dang if at like 4 o'clock I get a text from you.
Well, we got poured on.
Pouring rain.
Yeah, pouring rain.
And you say, Clay, I shot that big buck.
I said, I think I shot that big buck.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. And then it was pouring rain when you shot it, and basically we didn't find it till the next day after I had to leave to go on a bear hunt.
Spent hours looking for it.
And you looked for that deer for hours and hours by yourself because I had to leave. He found the buck.
Was going to give up. I said, this is a true story. I said, and I am not exaggerating. I said, I am going to walk this one more time. And I kind of, I sat down and said, all right, God, if you want me to find this buck, it's your will. And I said, and I kind of sat down too, and I said, I'm going to look at this and see where would I go if I was a deer, which was kind of corny, but it's, I was going to walk and I said, I'm going to walk this in one more time, and then I'm done. And I walked it one, and this has never happened. I've tried this many a time before with looking for a deer, and it's never worked. I mean, I tried it, I've tried it recently, but, and walked it and walk it back where we had walked numerous times and looked over, and there he was.
Yeah.
And I honestly did not think he was. I mean, it was a perseverance. It was, it wasn't the best shot. I mean, it was a good shot. Take it. He was, he was
hit him a little back.
He was, I hit him back, but I mean, it wasn't like I took a bad shot.
Right,
he was 20 yards.
broadside.
Yeah, broadside, 20 yards. I just
second deer.
Yeah,
First
it was
day
a new
ever
bow
do a bow
hunter.
kill.
Yeah. And
well, and that was a really awesome experience
Oh.
for both of us, and it kind of united us in a hunting sense, because it was, I mean, that was a good deer for where we're hunting, and 2 deer in the same day, and that kind of got you going bow hunting. And since then, you've done it all on your own.
quite a
And
bit.
I mean, Chris has lived all in several different places in the country.
Can't talk you into putting me on one again over there, but
Yeah, you'd sure try. Every year I send him a picture and he goes, "Is that the deer you're going to put me on?"
yeah.
But that's why we went to Canada together.
Right.
What a perfect segue.
Yeah.
So we're on our way back from Manitoba, Canada, and so we've already done a podcast. We talked about my hunt, but I want to talk about Chris's hunt because Chris learned a lot coming into this hunt, coming into Canada. We talked a lot about judging deer. We talked about a lot about what to expect. And why don't you just go ahead and start it off, Chris, just talking about your experience and kind of what happened.
Well, first of all, I mean, I want to thank you again for taking me up here, and it's been an amazing experience, and that's one thing too is, and you did bring up a good point is I did learn a lot, and I did kill a deer that was not as big as a deer that I intended on killing, but I'm still, happy with that deer. But
right,
the
learning curve's pretty steep.
It is steep, but one thing you said is I learned a lot. But you learn a lot by hunting, and that's one thing is I wish that I had a long time ago been doing the stuff I now, because you just got to go out and do it and learn, and it's like with the muzzle loader and using that. It was my first time to use a muzzle loader because I'm so into bows. And it's learning muzzle loaders, and now it's like and from using that and so much. But anyway, so with my hunt, Clay had been talking a lot, and maybe he had been emphasizing how these bucks can be difficult to judge, and they are. And part of that, one of the things we're looking for up here is, and this is one of the things that Tom, our outfitter, was talking about, was mass.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at that, but you're also looking at extremely large deer, even
bodied deer, large bodied deer,
even on 2-year-old deer over 200 pounds,
for sure.
Yeah.
And what you mean when you say mass is that's kind of like the thing that if a deer does not have good mass all the way out on the horn, he's probably not a mature animal.
Right.
Here. Now, in Arkansas, you can kill a spindly racked big buck that's probably a mature animal.
Right.
Mass is a good indicator of age in most places. But up here, that's what the Duck Mountains of southern Manitoba has, is mass.
Right.
And it's not necessarily known for world record scores, even though there's some incredible scoring deer. And we were hunting 60 miles from where Milo Hansen killed the world record.
Right.
So, I mean, not to say that there's not giant deer up here, but they're known for mass.
Right.
So, carry on.
And
I just wanted to qualify what you said.
Right. And so, my first day I went out and hunted and did not see – it was kind of one of those spots, and that's hunting, and it was at a spot that is called the swamp and didn't see anything.
Yeah,
and
you didn't see a deer the first day.
No. Which, I mean, I really wasn't that upset about because it was kind of – Tom had told me it's the spot where you don't see a lot, but a lot of times when you do it can be a big one.
That spot, there's no food source or anything. It literally is just a swamp in between two thick bedding areas, open swamp with big tall grass and
where
stuff.
you're going to catch them crossing. And it was windy and cold. This whole hunt was cold.
Yes.
And so was it the next day that I was set up?
The next morning.
Yeah,
the very next morning.
Yeah, the next morning we went in and I went out on an alfalfa field.
Yeah.
And you were hunting on the other alfalfa field, correct?
Yep, we were both I was sitting on a 90-acre alfalfa field.
Right.
And you were sitting on about a 15-acre alfalfa field, I think.
Right.
It wasn't even that big. Maybe it's 8 acres.
Right. But apparently they like my alfalfa field better.
Yeah.
They seem to this time. But very quickly, I opened up, the window I was in. And
so we're sitting in these little huts. Tom calls them huts, Tom Ainsworth. Just little box blinds that are on the ground. And you creep in there before daylight, get in there, and what's crazy is these deer don't even hardly spook off the field. I mean, well, they don't. If you creep in there without light, you're not going to spook deer for the most part.
Right, and to me, I mean, I've done hunts that are, back in where I'm carrying in my tree stand and running and gunning, and I've done, hunts on private land, and I've done, hunts on public land, not as many as you, and I love this just as much. I mean, this is it had its own aspect of it. I'm sitting out there in cold and and so it's
temperature that morning was 3 degrees.
Yeah, it was extremely cold.
3 degrees.
And so and so we're sitting out there, and some large does started coming out. And then I quickly see
just as the sun starts to come up.
Yeah, as the sun's coming up, and then I quickly see a buck. And this was an 8-point. And so then I got to start thinking, is this one of these deer we're talking about?
Yeah.
And me and Clay had been talking about this as long. And then Tom had also get some input. And maybe this is where it went wrong. And it's almost like we had emphasized it too much, and I think I'll have my take-home on it. But one thing that Tom had said was if it's racks
out past his ears.
And I remember hearing that. And these deer were out past 200 yards. And so I'm looking at them. And also, too, and as you know, but, for your listeners is these deer, I've never seen deer over 200 pounds.
Yeah.
And so these almost look like cows coming out.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to decide. And honestly, and as I told you, I thought that this buck was not what we were looking for.
You thought he was not?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't for sure.
And what we're looking for, there was never a score put on it. Last year I killed a buck in Manitoba that was 18 inches wide, had 5-inch bases and good mass all the way up the antler, 10.5-inch G2s. So, I mean, this big, massive frame. The buck weighed 248 pounds, but it scored 134 inches.
And I think one of the coolest deer I've seen, and I think one of the best looking and deer you've killed.
Yeah, and so I say that to say, like, people that just think about score, you're going to get thrown off. I mean, it's not like, okay, Chris, go out and only shoot 150-inch buck today.
Right.
Like that, you would lose so many killer deer if you did that. And that seems to be the way a lot of people think, especially when they're hunting real big buck country.
Right.
You know, like if you're hunting Iowa or if you're hunting Canada. But, man, I'll tell you what, you'll pass a lot of awesome deer. And the truth is that most deer don't score near as much as what people say they do.
Right.
I sent that picture of my buck last year, Chris, to people that knew better. And I wouldn't tell them what it scored, and they would text me back. And, I mean, maybe they were being nice, but they were like, man, that's got to be a 160-inch deer. I had knowledgeable people think that was a 160-inch deer. And that was a good picture, you know what I mean? And I was like, no, 134. And they were like, no way. But point being is that people, when your buddy says he killed a 150, he probably didn't. That's just the truth. So I say all that to say, when you talk about the deer, we were after a mature buck with good mass. And, boy, Tom has some shed antlers and dead heads and pictures of some little deer that are probably 15 inches wide, but massive, mature 4.5, 5.5-year-old deer that just they wouldn't have scored
what did he
good.
Call them?
Well, he called the deer with tight antlers bush bucks.
Yeah.
And he called bucks with big wide antlers prairie bucks. Yeah. But so you weren't looking for a 140 or 150 or 160. You were looking for a mature, heavy antlered buck.
Yeah, I wanted a deer that, like he called it, Coke cans. And so, I mean, honestly, and so I was trying to decide if this deer had mass, and Tom wasn't trying to throw me off, but I mean, it just kind of confused me because I wanted something that gave me that concrete, this is it.
Right.
And
You were looking for the one thing.
Yeah,
that,
which
like,
there
if
is.
the deer has that.
Well, actually, I'll tell you what I think it is. And so Tom said, you know, if it's out past its ears, and he probably threw in there, and it's a mature buck, but I just heard if it's out past its ears.
Right.
And so I watched this deer for a while, and then he chased a doe and ran off. And there was another one there who you know, he wasn't out past his ears. It might have had more mass. I don't know. I mean, these deer were out pretty far, and watched them for a while, and they had gone over the hill and they were feeding, and then, like I said, he had ran back in closer, and I saw he was clearly, as you saw, I mean, he was good, 4 inches past his ears?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I remember thinking, well, you know, this deer's so big that his mass, you know, I said, this is what we're after.
Yeah.
You know? And so he ran away where I didn't have a shot, and the other one that was there, I decided was not a buck. That I mean, he was an 8-point that wasn't maybe out past his ears, but he could have had that mass. I couldn't tell. And so, you know, I'm watching them, and then they're out there feeding, and he's chasing around. Well, then this buck comes back over that hill. And so I pull the muzzle loader up, and he's right at 134 yards. And go to shoot and misfire. And
so the muzzleloader misfires.
Correct.
The cap, so we're using 409 primers.
209.
Shooting a 209 primer. Yeah, you're right. 409 is the cleaner.
Yeah.
Got it. 209 primers. You're using a CVA, what was it?
Acura LR.
Yeah, CVA Acura.
LR, yeah.
And a good gun.
Yeah.
Misfires. The primer goes off. The gun does not ignite.
And
you
then
break the gun open
and
put another primer in.
correct.
Find the deer again. Pull the trigger. Pop.
Yeah.
Cap doesn't go off. Break the gun down.
And this is the first time I've ever hunted with a muzzleloader too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Break the gun down. Put another primer in. Put it on the deer.
And I don't know if was it 3 or 4?
Well, I thought it misfired 3 times and you shot it on the 4th.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm pretty sure because I think
So
I had
you did
4
it again.
primers. Yeah.
Pop.
Yeah.
The deer don't move. The deer aren't scared.
Yeah. They
They don't even look at it, do they?
No. And so
Wow.
I did it again, and it goes. It misfires, and I didn't know that this was even a possibility. And so I goes like, well, I'm done because I had left my ramrod in the truck. I mean, I was I was cooking with gas this day. I mean, and so the way I remember it is I started to lift the gun. And then the gun goes off.
It was a delayed ignition.
Right. And
which
actually,
is like
the
a
bucket,
nightmare for a muzzleloader.
Right. And the bucket actually moved to like 154 yards. I mean, I had compensated for that.
Oh, really? So he was moving back.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And was actually angling away at that time. But so I thought there's no way I hit this deer.
Yeah.
And went and looked for blood and looked for blood and looked for blood and did not find blood. And thought there was no way I hit this deer.
Yeah.
And turns out I did actually hit that deer.
It was a long story, but we found the deer the next day.
Yeah.
We found the deer the next day. And the deer had, been eaten to the bone by coyotes.
Within a day.
I mean, there was nothing left but horns and ears.
And one eyeball.
Yeah. So that was...
And he was not what I was looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the moral of the
he
story.
Was, I don't want to take away. I mean, any buck is I'm proud of any deer I kill. I mean, but this is a trip where I was, traveling looking for...
Honestly, it was a nice... probably 2-year-old deer for up here.
And the fact I didn't get his meat bothers,
You said from the very beginning, you were like, dude, I'm coming up here to kill a big buck for meat. You wanted big horns too, but...
Right. I mean, I brought my cooler for me, yeah. I make summer sausage, I make venison jerky.
And the deer, to give you... The deer was at least 17 inches wide.
Yeah.
And but short tines, short brows, short threes. But in
my take home on how you judge now.
So that's where we're going now. Is what did you learn?
So the next day I went out and sat in the same blind or whatever you want to call it, hut, and actually saw one of the coolest things. Actually that night, because I thought I had missed the deer.
Oh yeah,
and so that night I sat on the other on the alfalfa field that Clay had sat on, and as we're going to as dusk is coming on, I hear this. I thought it was Bigfoot, but.
It was a buck roar.
Yeah, it was a buck roar. It happened like 4 times, and I actually, if it would have just happened once, I would not have thought it.
Do what you can try to replicate it.
It goes, and it did it 4 times. Sounded just like that, but then it started a really, really mature grunt.
So you wouldn't have even known it was a deer, unless it followed up with just a normal bat.
Yeah, really mature grunt, and it's just cutting through these woods in between.
Yeah.
These 2 alfalfa fields, but it like the first one, I was like, what the heck was? I really don't believe in Bigfoot, but I might have if it had just happened once, and but it did it 4 times, and I'm pretty sure it was a roar, and then it was just grunting, and I tried to record it on my phone, but that didn't work.
Yeah.
But then the next morning, I was sitting in the blind where I thought I had missed that buck, and I walked to it, and we actually got in a little earlier that morning because we kind of barely got in. Before the sun, and I opened the windows in it. And I can just see these blobs out in the field. And they're huge blobs, and I can't make out what they are. And as the sun, and actually I thought I spooked a coyote beside me. It could have been a small deer, I don't know. But as the sun's coming up, I can, I knew they were deer. But as the sun's coming up, I can slowly make them out more and more. And then these 2 to my left, I can't make out racks, but I can make out they're fighting. and I can
You
hear
can see them pushing,
Yeah.
and you can hear their horns clacking.
and I can hear them just clacking. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I've never seen bucks fight. And the light comes up, and I, put my binos on them, and they're small bucks. And then I'm not making this up. It sounds like I am. And then 40 yards.
You telling the truth, Chris.
40 yards from that, 2 other bucks are feeding beside each other, and it's like they kind of looked at each other and they said, hey, let's fight.
Hey, those guys are fighting. Let's fight too.
And so they started fighting, and they were about the same size as the other 2, and so they're fighting. And then 50 to 60 yards from that were these huge, massive deer. And I couldn't make them out, and so I start looking at them, and I'm like, those are big deer. And then as the sun keeps coming up, I look up at them, and they start fighting. And so
there's
3 sets of bucks fighting.
3 sets of bucks fighting. How many does are out there? 12.
It was a rough guess. I mean, probably 12.
I just remember when you talked to me, you said there's 20 deer in front of me.
Yeah. So I mean, it was, I remember though when I saw the 2 big bucks, and this is my take-home point, is I looked at them and I'm looking through the binos and I go, oh, this is what they mean by mass. And so I think my take-home is if you've hunted and you've seen decent deer, good-sized deer, and if you're questioning it, then it's probably not.
Yeah.
And so, and if you see, when you see Clay's deer on his video, and that's a gimme, but it's like, if it comes out and you're like, oh, that's what they mean.
Yeah.
Then you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be a 7 or an 8 point. And if you're wanting a 150, you're probably not going to get it from that. But to me, it's like, oh, that's what they want.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they mean.
Yeah.
And it was just that easy. And so you've got this 8 and a 10 just out there. And I mean, it's just 2 deer that just are dwarfing everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I wish I could have seen that with you.
Yeah,
I wish you could have filmed it.
Yeah, I wish you could have got some. I mean, it's something I'll probably never see again.
Well, maybe next year.
Yeah.
But I'll probably be in that stand next year.
Maybe I'll be in the one you've been in that you've killed 2 in. I mean, I'll take that.
Oh, man. Well, you learned a ton. You learned a ton. And judging these deer, here's my synopsis on judging these deer, is that first of all, you've got to make sure that you're looking at a mature animal. And
right.
I talked about a 10-point that I saw on the podcast we did with Tom, where, you can be looking at an immature animal and his rack may look giant, but it's an immature body, and
right.
the deer's body characteristics are not, and so if he's out past his ears, but he's a 2-year-old, that then he's not going to be what you're after. But boy, if it's a fully mature buck with that big extended brisket, a huge neck, sagging back. I mean, up here you're truly looking for a mature deer. I mean, a 5-year-old deer, and boy, if he looks like he has any rack at all, and he's got a body like that, he's a deer you probably want to shoot.
Yeah, and I think also too, and I think Tom would be okay with me saying this though, but if you see that 10-point of that Clay saw, and you want to take that,
heck yeah,
Tom's okay with that.
Well, and
I would have probably
just gotta
took
have,
that and been happy.
The cool thing to me about this is any hunt, I don't care what you're doing, you've got to have goals and objectives. I mean, the goal and your objective may be to go there, have fun, and get some meat. And if that is your goal and objective, then shoot the first legal animal that you see. You can also go into a hunt like we did, Chris, and like I did, and my goal was to get some amazing organic Manitoba protein and to kill a mature buck. I didn't care if it was 130 inches or 160. I really didn't. It may be hard for you to believe that, but it's true. I would have shot a 130-inch heavy racked buck like last year and been thrilled. And I just was fortunate and killed one that was a lot bigger than that. But I had an objective. My objective was to kill a mature deer. And so whatever you set your goal for, you want to hit that target. You don't want to. Yeah, and that's what's fun about having goals and objectives inside of hunting.
Well, and I think there's nothing wrong with the fact too. I mean, it's we've put in a lot of time to come up here to Manitoba, and I'm paying my hard-earned money to get a deer that I might not ever see in my lifetime, and it actually bothers me more that I'm coming home without meat from my deer.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's okay, if I'm coming up here and wanting to get a deer that I might not see in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And we talk about how those deer don't spook, but that's actually not completely true. You drive out on that field.
The big bucks.
And a big buck
They're
will
different.
run the second it sees you.
Different.
And so a doe won't, but I mean, they're still not as, I mean, it's not like we're talking, these things are walking.
It's a tough hunt.
Yeah.
Every hunt, there's factors that play into the difficulty and challenge of it. And on this hunt, it's time in the stand. Boy, we just pounded it out, and you just sit for long, long hours, and temperature.
Right.
We were that morning that you shot your deer. It was 3 degrees.
Yeah.
And the high temperature that day was in the like 20 degrees or 21 or something.
Well, and I'll
low
take
teens,
upper
teens.
And I think that that you're going to give me some of that meat, and I'm going to go home and celebrate the life of that animal by cooking summer sausage for.
We're gonna split the meat.
Right, for my family, Jeannie's family.
Yeah.
And deer jerky and
boy, it is different than our Arkansas deer. I'll tell you what, it really is.
Well, and I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that, and people might say trophy hunting or whatnot, but to me, it's like, man, there's nothing. To me, it's coming. You say goals and objectives and stuff, and to have a goal up here and to do
that's
this,
why you come to Canada. I
Right.
mean, if you wanted to gather 200 pounds of meat to grind and make steaks out of, we would have gone over to where I took you the first year when you killed that doe in Washington County, Arkansas.
Right.
I mean, we could have done it, but we drove up here for the getting to hunt a new landscape, the challenge of it, the excitement of it, the fun of it. And yeah, big bucks. I got zero. You know how much shame I've got for that? Look at my hand here. Zero. Taking older mature animals out of the population is an honorable good thing. Now, if all we were doing was cutting off the horns and telling the outfitter to keep the meat, that's not cool. But whatever. If you got to do that, you got to do it.
Yeah.
But
and that I wish I could get that meat.
coyotes ate it, brother.
I know. Well, and that they need that too. It's cold up there.
Well, hey, the good news is, Chris, is that good Lord willing, we're going to come back next year. Me and you. And so, hey, let's talk about our gear that we used for staying warm.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about it. So we were hunting, tree stand hunting, temperatures that were, I think the coldest it got was 3 degrees. And the high temperatures were in the low 20s, upper teens, even mid-teens some days. And so what I was wearing, I'm just going to start with what I was wearing. I wore one pair of thin merino wool socks, and I put 2 sticky hot hands on my toes, one on top of my toes and one up on my leg, like kind of where my ankle. Yeah, where you told me the veins run down into the feet.
Yeah,
arteries
there's a vein there too, but yeah.
The arteries run down to the feet. And then I put a fairly heavy wool sock over that, and then I used a pair of Irish Setter 1,200 Thinsulate, 1,200 grains of Thinsulate, just regular old boot. I mean, somebody gave me those boots. That's the boots I wore. I wore the merino wool First Light base layers, touching my skin. So everything touching skin was merino wool, which was very important because we were at different times. We were sweating a little bit, riding in. Like you had to get dressed. Like the logistics of dressing are so crazy because you got to get dressed before you go, and so you're riding in a truck and you're got to walk to the stand, but you're not carrying a bunch of stuff. We just weren't. We were dressing totally and then going in. We didn't have to walk far, but and then Chris, I wore my sawbuck pants. So I had the merino wool base layer, sawbuck pants, my puffy pants, my Uncompahgre puffy First Light pants, and then the Sanctuary bibs. That's what I had on bottom. 4 or 5 layers there, okay? On top, I wore the merino wool base layer. I wore one of the First Light Klamath hooded little fleece sweater. Mm-hmm. Then I wore a Uncompahgre puffy vest. Then I wore a Cirrus puffy vest. And then I wore the Sanctuary jacket. That's what I wore. And I would take at least 3 to 4 hot hands every single sit.
You were a hot hand addict.
We were wearing them out. I would put a hot hand in the left front pocket of my Klamath hoodie. There's a little zipper right over here. I kind of felt like it was right over my heart, so maybe it was warming my whole body. I would put that there. I would have 2 for my hands that I would keep in the front pockets of that Sanctuary jacket, and then I would put 1 on the kind of the back of my neck, kind of where your neck meets your back.
That's
and
smart.
Then so those are my 4 hot hands, and then I would wear at least 2 of the merino wool beanies, and then a brimmed orange beanie because you had to wear orange. So I wore 3 layers on the top. And usually I would have the hood of that Sanctuary up over my head and zip it up. My glasses would fog up and my beard was getting caught in the zipper. But other than that, it worked pretty good when I zipped it all the way up. That was what I wore. What did you wear?
So I have to wear like a synthetic. And you're gonna have to help me with some of the names. I have to wear synthetic under my wool because
The wool on skin with you doesn't work.
It not unless I have used the Arrow wool. Is that what it's called?
Okay, yeah, the synthetic mix in with the merino wool.
Yeah, and I do okay with that. But if I'm using straight up wool, a lot of times I'll itch too bad.
Okay.
Or get a rash, especially in real cold stuff. So I wear like a silk synthetic base layer, and then I had is it the Furnace?
Furnace.
Yeah.
The Furnace First Light base layer.
Correct. And then actually something I think you have this problem too, but my feet get cold.
Yes.
And
my feet got cold with what I did.
Right. And actually this is the warmest my feet have been, but I've always used rubber boots. You told me use rubber boots.
Yep.
And I do what you say. And my feet were never able to breathe.
Yeah.
And so I got some of the Schnee's 600 gram Thinsulate boots. Yeah. And I use some powder in there because my feet sweat.
Like foot powder.
Yeah. And I use a liner sock, and then I use the Darn Tough real thick hunting sock, and I also use like an ankle sock. And then my feet, letting them breathe is huge.
Yeah.
And then I used like this little booty thing. I don't even know what it's called. And would put.
Okay, so yeah, it was a booty that went over your boots.
Correct.
Once you got in the stand.
Yeah, and you pointed out, which was true. If I wait till my feet are cold, it's worthless.
Yeah, it's too late.
Yeah, so
I never gain it back.
Yeah, and so I put them on the second I got in the stand, and would throw hot hands in there, and that worked like a charm, man.
Yeah.
There was times when my feet didn't get cold.
Just not at all.
Yeah. Now that wasn't every time, but there was times. And then so I wore the Furnace, and then usually I wore the incinerator overalls.
Bibs and jacket.
And the jacket.
Sitka.
Yeah, Sitka.
I'm not supposed to. I can't utter those words.
Oh, sorry. You asked me what I wore.
I'm just kidding, man. Okay.
I can't lie, so
no, I'm kidding. You were like hesitating to say it.
Yeah, I was like, am I supposed to make something up here? And then but for my top,
no, that's good stuff, man.
Yeah, it was good stuff, and then it worked. It is a little loud, and then my top. I wore, it was First Light stuff, but I don't remember. I wore the Cirrus jacket.
Cirrus puffy.
Yeah, and then, that hoodie.
Like a Klamath hoodie.
Yeah.
Or,
and then also that one that I also wear, it's like got the little squares and under. I don't remember the name.
The panel fleece. Or
and
I can't remember what they call it. Grid fleece.
Yeah, and then I wore the incinerator hat.
Yeah.
And then you know what I really like are those fingerless wool First Light gloves.
Oh, really? Did you like those? Did you wear those?
Yeah.
Fingerless, huh?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's the correct term.
Well, it is. I mean, they look like they're fingerless.
And then I have a hand warmer, a Sitka hand warmer, and I threw some hot hands in there.
Yeah. That's the one thing I forgot, which killed me.
No, and I'm sure it did. And then I had a Sitka net gator.
Yeah. Well, how would you rate your warmth?
I was not in a tree stand.
Yeah, so you had the wind
saddle
off of you.
Yeah, and so I did all right. We had the gear, but I was not doing what you were doing. So I did all right. There was a few times my feet got cold, but I've been colder in not as cold weather. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? I've been texting Brent Reeves and Straight Cedillo. We were in New Mexico 2 weeks ago, and I was texting them saying it is 3 degrees, and I am tree stand hunting in Manitoba. And I am not as cold as I was riding a mule in New Mexico 2 weeks ago. I got so cold in New Mexico, I thought I was going to pass out.
Was that just because you didn't have the gear?
Well, I guess. I think one morning it was 17 degrees, and we were just kind of preparing for an active hunt, so we didn't wear tons of clothes. And it just never got warm that day, and I was so cold. There was a time when it's never happened to me before, but I actually started getting almost nauseous.
Were you at higher altitudes?
Yeah, we were at like 8,000 feet.
That probably had a big part to do with it, too.
Yeah. But I said, it's 3 degrees in Manitoba, and I'm tree stand hunting, taking a 10-mile-per-hour wind in the face, and I'm not as cold as I was in New Mexico 10 days ago. But you stayed pretty warm with your gear.
I did.
Yeah. Well, to me, that's the fun of this hunt. There's a challenge inside of just taking the brutal cold. And I was hunting out of a tree saddle, a tethered tree saddle, for 2 afternoons, I guess. And then I tree stand hunted 2 mornings out of just a stand.
I was in a tree stand once.
You were in a tree stand that windy day.
Yeah, and
so
I did okay
cold.
with that, except for my feet, because I didn't put on the
booties
till my feet got cold.
Yeah.
That was a mistake.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else we were supposed to talk about, Chris? We kind of had a running list. We wanted to tell the canoe story. We wanted to... we mainly want to talk about judging deer and talking about your experience up here. But, man, it's been really, really fun hunting with you. And, we're gonna do it again, good Lord willing. And people, if they're interested in where we hunted, we did a podcast with Tom Ainsworth. Holy cow, what a guy.
Oh, I mean, you won't meet a nicer guy.
You wouldn't even have to go hunting with Tom to come up here and have a good time. Tom's 71, and he is a classic Canadian, just salt-of-the-earth rancher, hunter, outfitter.
It kind of makes you feel bad in the fact it's like, am I 37 or 38? How old are you?
I'm 40.
So
I turned 40 in September.
Yeah, so I'm 38. I'm pretty sure the guy could outwork me up. I mean, the guy
No
is.
doubt.
I mean, and we're looking for my deer, and I would go somewhere and I would be like, I think this is a good. Now, granted, it's his land, but I would go here and I'd be like, I think this is a good trail, and I would see a boot print, and Tom's already gone down it.
Yeah.
He's just a 6'6" lanky guy without an ounce of fat on him, and he just,
He really is in incredible shape.
Yeah, and he doesn't. It takes a lot to get him upset, and he just, he's just always happy,
Yep.
And good guy.
Well, he
Deb, she's awesome.
Yeah, you feel like you're just going to your friend's house and hunting with him for a week.
Yeah.
Eat at Tom's table, home cooked meals, every single meal. Stay at our own little bunker house. Golly, it's just fun. There's just no other way to describe it. It's not like a wilderness adventure hunt. I mean, it's just fun. There's just farm country whitetail hunting.
It's almost like going to it's almost going like a holiday.
Yeah.
Like going home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I hate that it's going to be a year away.
I don't necessarily want to say this hunt is cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a $3,000 hunt.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. I mean, that's what it costs, and that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for me.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But almost anybody, if they set their mind to save up that money, and it was right for them, Chris. Some people like see people that travel and hunt and just assume that maybe that's something that they should do, and I don't necessarily think that it is. I mean, there's certain time periods in your life when that's just not in the cards, and that's okay. So if you're 30 years old and building a business and have young kids, I mean, it may not be the time for you to spend $3,000 on a hunt and be gone for 9 days.
It's a long drive, It's
so I say that to say, because sometimes I think people see, I feel it because I do travel a lot and hunt, but this is my, this is part of my business. This is what I do. This is calculated into my family. And my family's on board with what we're doing. And
right.
And so anyway, because I don't want to throw around a number and say, $3,000, that's easy, you could do it. Well, maybe you shouldn't do it. But there's a lot of guys that are in a stage of life when that's doable.
In comparison to a lot of other hunts, too. It's very doable.
I think most people think a big Canadian whitetail hunt would be $5,000 to $7,000.
Right.
And it's not. This is a bird nest on the ground, to be honest with you. And you know what? We're going to cut this out of the podcast because I don't want anybody to go up there.
You kind of upset me with telling that much, yeah. Those two bucks that were fighting, man.
They're still out there.
Yeah. As of right now, they're still there.
You know what? We want to help Tom because he
he's
sure helped us. Man, what a guy. Deb. It's just so much fun going up there. But you won't be able to go the week that we're going.
Yeah.
Because we'll be there.
Yeah.
But feel free to come after us. Don't come before us.
Yeah.
Because we kind of need the pick of the farm. But Chris, can you think of anything else? Any closing comments? This is your first time on the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast, and knowing that there was a Bear Hunting Magazine podcast.
This is true. I would say, it's I appreciate everything you do for hunting and everything you've done for me. And, one of the big things I've learned is, one of the big things that you told me is you can't, the best way to get to know a land is to hunt it. And, and I find that true is you've got to hunt it and learn. It's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay, but learn from it. And that's, and it, it's, in the medical field, I don't like it, who people who won't admit that they're wrong or make mistakes. And that's the same thing in anything. It's, say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. And, here's how we're going to learn from it. And that's the way to do life, I think. And that's, that's my 2 cents.
Yep. Well, hey, appreciate it, man. This has been a ton of fun. So keep the wild places wild, because that's where the bears and the big Canadian whitetail bucks live.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew, Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Art Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.